are going to be in the book of Colossians, in Colossians chapter 3. Stan had let me know earlier that he is preaching at Broadway, and so he had asked if I would go ahead and teach tonight, and I said that I was happy to do so. So we're going to have a big class, and I hope a big discussion. I hope we do, because I don't know how long. We'll see how long I last at this point. But we're going to be in Colossians chapter 3. You know, some of the stuff that I've been looking at, some of the books that I've been reading, some of the different things I've been going through here of late, it's going to sound funny when I say this, but it's changed my perspective on how we view life, or how life should be viewed. And more than that, it's opened my eyes to the fact that our life, our joy, everything that comes from, everything that we view, it's all a matter of perspective, right? Situations, the way that we view them, the way that we interact with them, the way that we go about them, is all based off of the perspective that we have, right? If you go through something hard, right? We have people within our family here at Farmington that are going through difficult times. And it's all based, how they deal with it is all based on the perspective that they have about it. And I think that's a lot of what Colossians 3 deals with, is this perspective. Right? And it starts there in verse 1, right? Since then, you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Verse 1 starts with where your perspective should be. And I like the way that it's worded in verse 1, right? In verse 1, there is no if this has happened, right? Because if it was if there was something along like, if you've been raised with Christ, well, then there leaves room for doubt. And when you have room for doubt, well, it's really easy to go and look and say, well, I'm not going to have this heavenly, eternal, I've been raised with Christ perspective, because what if I haven't been? And if I haven't been, then why would I view it this way? Right? And so when I look at this, there is a sense or a abode of confidence that I, as a Christian, can have when it says, since I have been raised with Christ, or since then you have been raised with Christ. It's the ability to align my perspective with that. So I ask you this question. And feel free to answer. Some of you can answer, some of you may not want to. If you knew that exactly 1 week from today, so next Wednesday, that Jesus was going to come back, what would change, or would anything change in your life currently? Like I said, you don't have to answer that, but I want you to reflect on that. If you knew that 1 week from today, Jesus was going to return, what in your life, or would anything in your life, change? And what would it be?
I dare say, Carson, anybody who says nothing will change is not telling the truth.
Yeah.
That's my statement. None of us are good enough to say, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm ready. I wouldn't say anything. Everybody it would make a difference.
Yeah.
You like our parents used to say, you straighten up.
Mm-hmm.
Straighten up.
Well, what if you knew you was going to die 1 week from today? I mean, it's all the same.
Yeah.
Same thing.
You're through. You can't change anything after you die.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't worry about Christ coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's when you die, it's finished.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter, whether Christ is coming back or not. Next week. If you die next week, you're done.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I pose that question is, and I think I think all of us, I agree with Jay, I think all of us, whether it's Christ coming back or we're going to die, however that question is posed, I think all of us would look and say, oh, I would change this, or my schedule would change by this, or I would prioritize this, or things like that. And so I ask a question that all of you know is about to come, and it's not a new question. Everyone knows what the follow-up question to this is going to be. Well, if you know that you have priorities, if you know you have scheduling things, if you know you have whatever it is that needs to change, when I ask that question of if you die next week or if Jesus comes back next week, why don't we take it seriously now, since we know that Christ will come like a thief in the night, or that life is like a vapor? What changes? You know, and I think everyone, when I asked that question, immediately that's where their mind went to, oh, well, you know, if I have something I need to change because I know Jesus is coming back, I probably should change it now. And I ask that question because it's all about perspective. Right? Here's the true perspective. Most of us don't live with the perspective of, I've got 1 week left, and that's all I've got. What would I change within that 1 week if I have 1 week left? That's not a fun perspective to live with. I'll be honest with you. If you live your life as though you only have 1 week left to live, you most of the time will dread that week because you think, oh, it's about to come to an end. That's how most people view it. Right? But all of this boils down to perspective. I think for us as Christians, we have to have the perspective that life is a vapor and that Christ can come at any time. And that does not mean we live in fear. Right? That does not mean that we live fearful of, oh, well, tomorrow could be my last day. I need to be afraid of dying. No, if you have an eternal perspective, if you have a heavenly perspective, it's one of those things, and it sounds weird, but I remember my grandmother saying it. I remember my great-granddad saying it. I remember a bunch of people that you are around right before they pass away that have a relationship with the Lord that say, I'm ready to go home. Because, one, they know that the life that they're living now, they are in pain, they are in suffering, it's coming to an end. They are ready to go home. But two, they have confidence and assurance of what is to come. They have an eternal, a heavenly perspective. And so they don't fear the death that is about to come. And I think part of what we are trying to get to, and I don't know if we'll ever truly get to until we are in that stage of life where we know that death is knocking at our doorstep, that we ever truly become okay with dying. That this is the end. You know, I've looked at it, and I've always said it, but internally I still fight the battle of, oh, if I were to get into the truck tonight and go home, and I got hit by a drunk driver or something like that and was killed instantly, I can sit here and say that, you know what, I'm okay because I know where I'm going. But internally, I struggle with that because I go, yeah, but then I miss seeing all the things that'll happen with Taylor and I miss watching Cameron grow up. I miss seeing all these good things. And then my mind goes to there, and I'm just like, am I really okay with it? And I don't think you have to, I don't think the point of what we're going to get to tonight is ever to come to terms with and say, you know what, I'm okay. I'm just going to go get in a car and I'm okay if I get, you know. But I think it's all about changing our perspective. Why are we living this life? What's the point? What's the purpose of living this life? You know, one of my favorite books, and I've expressed this, and it's, to so many people, it's so backwards, because truthfully, one of my favorite books to read in Scripture is the book of Ecclesiastes. And for most people, it is a miserable, miserable read, because I think they miss the point. I think they get so caught up in seeing all the times that Solomon goes through and is saying life is miserable, everything is terrible, everything is meaningless, it's all folly, nothing is good, that they miss the whole point when he goes and he starts to interject and say all of it's meaningless, all of it's worthless until God entered the equation, and then all of a sudden things started to have meaning again. He tries all this stuff in life. He goes and he has all the money that a person could ask for. He has everything financially that he could ever want. And he even says that's folly, that's meaningless, it's worthless, it has no value. Most of us in life would say, well, if we can just get a certain amount of money, life's going to be great. And so our perspective is, okay, how can we go and make and accrue as much money as we can while we're in this life? And that becomes our perspective. I can tell you I've been reading a book, and I mentioned it during the sermon last week, I think, but the book is called Satisfied, and I can tell you for certain as I've read through that book that I realize that money, all it does is buy you stuff, and stuff doesn't make you happy, because if it made you happy, you wouldn't keep going and go and buy more stuff. So if it's not money, then maybe it's relationships. Well, Solomon expressed that as well. Solomon had many wives and concubines and everything else that you could ask for. He had relationships upon relationships. And you know what he said about that? It's meaningless. It's worthless. It has no value. It brought him no joy. Okay, so it's not about money. It's not about relationships. Okay, maybe it is about stuff. Maybe it's about all the stuff that I can get. Well, let me tell you, Solomon had all the stuff he could ever want.
I wonder if he's ever satisfied,
Oh, he never was until that very end. The very end of that, he said, the conclusion of the whole matter is this, to fear God and keep His commandments. Right? And he goes through and he says, all these things, I sought out to find joy and happiness in life, and I never found it in any place except for God. See, because when you go and you read the parts where God entered the equation, all of a sudden, next thing you know, he says, eat, drink, be happy, be joyful. All of a sudden, when God entered the equation, but everything else that he went to figure out and sought out to do and sought out to have, he says it's worthless and it's meaningless and it's detestable and it's folly and it's just toil and it's all the bad adjectives that you can come up with. Unless God. It's all about perspective. See, all of those things, none of those things are bad. Having monetary value or worth is not bad, and it can be used for really good things. Having a relationship with your spouse, your children, whatever it might be, those are not bad things. Your job is not a bad thing. It's all based on perspective. And that's exactly what we get into here in chapter 3. What is our mindset about? Again, I'll read verse 1 and we'll read through verse 4. Since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with Him in glory. Right? You have a new perspective as a Christian. Your mind is not to be set on things of this world. Your mind is to be set on eternal, holy things. Things that are to come when Christ is raised. And it says that your life has been hidden with Christ. And so when He is raised, you too shall be raised in glory with Him. It says that you will get to appear with Him. Yet I think we still struggle with, how can I get the best and the most out of this world while still getting whatever I can out of the relationship with Jesus? Yes, Jay.
I think our perspective on looking at things above, that's what it says,
Mm-hmm.
things above. This, I'll just speak personally. It's like a pendulum, not a pendulum scale.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in my 20s and 30s, probably 25% I looked Now I'm in my upper 50s, it's kind of switched. It's probably 75-25.
Mm-hmm.
I think I look at things above about 75% and things above about 25%. And as I get closer to death, I think it'll keep going. I think that now there are some people who've got that mastered at a young age,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's something. But I think the older we get, the more we look at things above, and the less we think of things like money and things on here on earth. You know, I think it comes with age and wisdom.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes with experience as well. You know, the older you get, the more experience that you have, the more that you've lived, the more you realize that the things that, you know, that Solomon talks about, the more you start to realize, yeah, you know what, Solomon's right. Those things really don't matter that much. But as a kid, and I'm still in that, I still look at myself and I know that I'm a kid still. I'm 26 years old. I am still a kid. You know, I do. I look at that and I still think sometimes more about money and things like that than I do about, you know, eternal perspective or eternal things. You know, I'll be the first to admit that there are times where I look in the bank account and my main concern is about the number that's in the bank account than, you know, how it got into the bank account in the first place. That it's a blessing that I even have anything in the bank account in the first place. You know, and I'll be the first to admit that. And it's all about changing our mindset, and I keep using this word, and I know I've said it a lot, but changing our perspective. That word, for some reason, the more that I've read through all of these different books that I've been reading through, whether it's Mere Discipleship, whether it's this book, Satisfied, all of these just keep coming up with this word, perspective. I've chosen to take the perspective that that's a God thing. I think that's something that he's challenging me in my life to examine, to look at, to strongly consider. Because I can definitely go through times in my life when I ask that question of if I knew that I was going to die a week from today, or if Jesus was going to come back, what are things that I would change? I'd be the first to admit I have a whole list of them. And then I follow it up with that same question of, if I know that life is a vapor, and I know that Christ comes back like a thief in the night, why haven't I already made the change? And so I look at this. I have to work on, and this isn't something I think any of us are going to be able to fully figure out. I don't think any of this is something that we figure out in a night. But I open this up and I talk about this to hopefully generate thought, conversation, self-reflection, whatever it might be, within your own personal life of what is my perspective? What are the things I am focusing on? What is my motivation? What is the reason I'm living my life? And does it need to change? Do I need to sit down and look and say, if I know that Jesus is coming back, what is it that I need to change, so I'm going to go ahead and make those changes? Or at least work on making those changes. So this is what it says about having that eternal perspective. Keep reading with me in verse 5. It says this, it says, "Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature, whether it be sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming. See, you used to walk in these ways, in the ways that you once lived, but now you must also rid yourself of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices, and you have put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge and the image of its Creator. Here there is no Gentile, no Jew, there is no circumcised or uncircumcised, there is no barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all." So what do we do when we get this eternal perspective? Or, I guess better yet, it's not necessarily that we have gained this eternal perspective, but as we are attempting and working to get this eternal perspective, what is it that we're called to do? Put off what?
I don't know what you're asking for, but verse 12 says, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. In a way, I understand what you're saying. We should be focusing on things above it. There's things here that we focus on, like the love we have for the family. I mean, that's here. That's not love. It's talking about love and the way you treat people, the way you treat your fellow man, and that's things going on this earth. It's just how we look at them. I don't really see the big separation on things above and some things on earth. I know we're not supposed to dwell on these sins he's talking about, but these other things like compassion, kindness, and whatever, that's the way we treat our fellow man. That's the way we live our lives.
No, and those, I think those are exactly the things that are what things above are. As far as to me, when I read that, those things that are above, the compassion that you're supposed to have, those are earthly things that are still played out between our fellow man, between spouses, children, things like that. Those are the earthly vessels in which we focus on the things that are above. I guess that would be my way of phrasing it. I think earthly vessel, yeah. Of how we focus on things above. The one that I was looking at is right here, what we just read. It says to put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature. Right? Take off this and then clothe yourself with that. I think that's the big thing. In order to put something on, you got to take something off. We do this when we go home. Most of us don't have stinky, dirty clothes, and we look and say, oh, we need to freshen up and put nicer or better clothes on. We don't just go into our closet, leave our stinky, dirty clothes on, and put new clothes over it and go, hey, I'm clean now. At least, I don't think any of us do that. I think most of us go when we go, okay, I need to take off these stinky, dirty clothes. I need to go take a shower. I need to go, clean myself up, and then I'll put on these new things. Right? I mowed the grass before I came here. The last thing I was going to do before coming into this church building was just go and put this nice stuff on over grass, being covered in grass. One, it's itchy and it's uncomfortable. Two, I stunk probably to high heaven because I was out there sweating and covered in grass. I needed to get out of what was old, get out of the dirty stuff, so that I could clean myself up and put on the new stuff, which is exactly what you're talking about. Right? We've got to get rid of this anger, malice, slander, lying, sexual immorality, greed. And most of us, as we go through that list, we're like, oh, I'm good. I can get angry, but I don't exercise my anger. Anger is not really a big problem. Malice, I don't wish any ill harm on anyone else. I don't have to worry about malice. The slander, sometimes, but it's really not that big of a problem for me. Lying, that may be my biggest one, and you know what, I can work on that one. Sexual immorality, I'm good there. I'm faithful to my wife or to my spouse. I'm all good there. Greed, I'm good. I'm not really that greedy. And we start to justify as we go through this list of stuff that he says, and we go, well, I'm good. And we start checking all of these things off, but we still have these other sins that are over here that may not actually be listed in that. And we go, okay, these are fine sins. Let me get rid of the others, and then I can still go and put on all these things like love and compassion and everything else. These are still dirty items. These are still things that need to be taken care of. Just because it's not necessarily listed here doesn't mean that it's not something that still needs to be addressed and taken care of. These specifically are things that have been going on within this church, within this place and culture that needed to be addressed specifically. But that doesn't leave out any of these other sins that are over here. Right? Now, granted, here is the thing. A lot of sins do fall under this in some way. This is a very overarching list. Right? Anger. How do you deal with it? Here's my question. Is anger itself a sin? No. Right? No, anger is not a sin. The Bible points that out. The Bible states clearly that anger is not a sin. It's what you do with anger that becomes a sin. Right? So, when it says, do not be angry or you need to take care of your anger, it's not saying like, oh, you got angry over the situation, how dare you, you pitiful sinner. This is what you do out of that anger. How many of us, and I look at this in a very impulsive way, how many of us act out of anger just impulsively? Something happens against us and our immediate response is to snap back. And most of us, it happens either one in the morning when you just wake up, you haven't had time to really get going, or it happens really late at night when your body is just drained and you're tired. We oftentimes act out of anger when we're tired. Unfortunately, it seems as though a lot of times when Satan gives us time to be angry, it's in those moments when we're tired. And so we have to be careful and watch what we do out of anger. Malice. I think most of us in here, at least I hope most of us in here would say that none of us are maliceful. I don't think that's a word, but you know what I mean. Maliceful people. I don't think most of us harbor any sorts of malice or any type of malice towards others. But I also ask the question, how many times do you turn on the news and you see situations that go on that it may make you angry, and it may make you harbor some sort of malice towards that person because of something they've done to someone else. Maybe it's something they've done to you. I'll tell you this, I got on Facebook just today, and I went and I don't know if any of you have seen this, I'm sure you've seen it on the news, there's a 17-year-old that was killed. A 14-year-old was the one who took his life. And you look at it, and I think most of us, our immediate response is just like, give him the book. And I'm not saying that the law shouldn't do that, but why are we saying that? Why are we saying give him the book? Should we not also have compassion? And that's a tough one. It really is. I look at different situations that go on politically. How often do we see that going on politically? The malice and the anger and everything else that we see that constantly goes on. How often do we let ourselves get into that? And maybe we don't act upon it. Well, man, we have those thoughts. And I'm not necessarily saying those thoughts are always wrong because you don't act on them. But how can we get to a place where those thoughts become less and less? Slander. Again, how often do we slander people we don't even realize? How often do we say something negative against someone else and slander their name and we don't even realize that we're doing it? I can tell you, I used to be really bad about this. I used to, you would hear, and slander shows up in most forms like gossip. Especially when you're in high school, middle school, things like that, any little bad thing that someone hears about someone else, that's the first thing that's going to go and be spread around. And how often do we, as kids, how often do we do that? I can tell you, I did it way more than I should have, and I look at it and I go, man, I'm doing exactly what it's telling me not to do, that's what I'm supposed to get rid of. The list goes on and on. Lying. Lying is about the biggest one I think most of us can look at and say, man, I've got to really clean that one up. Sexual immorality, the greed. How often, the evil desires, how often do we do these things? We don't even realize it. We've just got to look at it. Right? We can't leave these dirty taking a shower, it makes them clean. No, it doesn't. They stink. And I can tell you because I was their counselor for years. They smell nasty, even with the new clothes on. And it's the same thing with us as Christians. It does us no good to clothe ourselves in love and compassion and everything else that's good, that's talked about, that's there in verse 12. Right? As God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience. Bear with one another and forgive with one another. What good does it do us as Christians to do all of those things, to clothe ourselves with those things, if we're still going to be sitting in our own filth? As important as it is, and I think it is vitally important that we go and clothe ourselves with these things, I think it's just as important, if not more, to get rid of and take off the ways of the world and the old things. Now here's the reality. Are we ever going to be perfect at it? No. None of us will ever be perfect at it. I have a way of comparing this. We're gonna try it. It makes sense in my head. We'll see if it makes sense in y'all's. Right? I view it the same way. The truth is, none of us are going to be perfect at it. Just like every day, when you go out and you do any sort of work and you get dirty and messy, you've got to change your clothes again and take a shower. I think it's the same way with our Christian life. The truth is, we can clothe ourselves and do these things, but we are humans that make mistakes, and we are people that are going to constantly make mistakes. The truth is it is up to us to continually go and continue to remove these dirty things from ourselves as often and as much as we can. All right? Here's where I may lose you, but we'll see. Right? In this scenario, I view Christ's blood, that we are continually cleansed, like that of a shower. Right? What do you do when you get dirty and stinky? You go take a shower. You go clean yourself. Right? And it just so happens that you clean yourself with water, which is what baptism does. You are buried in Christ and raised as new creation so that you can be cleansed. And you're not cleansed by the water. The water has nothing to do with it, but you're cleansed by the blood of Christ. You are constantly being cleansed by the blood of Christ, but you have got to make an effort to take off the dirty clothes first. Now, I may have lost you, and that's fine if I did. It makes sense in my head. But it does us no good to keep just covering up and putting on layer after layer of clean clothes if it's still at the base, it's dirty. There's not enough Axe body spray in the world that can make an 8-year-old smell good after 3 days of camp without taking a shower. It's the same way with us as Christians. There's not enough love and compassion and kindness and goodness and good things that we could put on that's going to cover up the stench of the things that we still do wrong. So it's vital in this perspective that we have. If we have this heavenly perspective, that we go through and we make sure to take off these things that make us dirty, these things that mar us, so that when we put on this character of Christ, when we put on the things of Christ, when we put on these clean clothes, as we'll say, we're not still smelling that. So it is. We've got to make sure that in our perspective that we are taking off these dirty things, so that, as David said earlier, so that we can clothe ourselves in what's good. There again in verse 12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and the love that we have. And it says in there, love is the most important one. I think all of us know how important love is, according to Scripture. I mean, out of all the virtues that we have, love, out of all of those virtues, love has an entire chapter written on it because of how important that it is. And in this verse, it says it's the most important one above all of these other ones. Put on love because it ties together everything in perfect unity. So not only do we have to take the clothes off, we've got to start putting some clothes on. We need to start examining how am I treating others? Am I showing that compassion? Am I showing them love? Am I showing kindness and gentleness and patience? Have I forgiven someone that needs to be forgiven? And I love how it's phrased in here because it really puts the onus back on us. If any of you has agreements against someone else, forgive as the Lord forgave you. We don't really have an excuse of why we can't forgive somebody. If God has forgiven us, all the more we should be forgiving one another. And I understand that's tough. I understand that is not an easy thing to do sometimes. Because if someone has done something against you that has hurt you, whatever it may be, it is hard to forgive. It really is. But as Christians, our responsibility Who's got the power of your heart? If it's God, your perspective will naturally change. If it's not, there your perspective will be. Right? It's the same thing. You reap what you sow. You know, if you're out going through a field and you're planting corn, you can't expect beans to come out of the ground. If it did, one, you either got the wrong seed and someone lied to you, or there's a miracle that happened. If you go into the world and your heart is set that I need to make as much money as I can, how would you expect your perspective to be anything else other than, how can I get more money? Our hearts have to be ruled, given to, admonished, encouraged, and brought forth before God, and our perspective will change from that. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. Who has your heart?